Good morning, this is Miss Cannon, and today we are going to talk about the Enlightenment. What does it mean to be enlightened? Is the question. And to be enlightened is to have knowledge, is to expand your mind. I think that on your notes you should square out the word light because it is kind of like a light bulb clicking on. And I don't want you to think that the Enlightenment is the light bulb movement or anything like that, but it is to expand yourself, to be aware of situations, to use reason and logic. That's why it's called the movement or age of reason. And what you need to think about is that people are going to use more reason and logic to solve the problems and issues of the world. Religion is still a big factor, but people are going to think within themselves, trying to problem solve and critically think. A couple of things are themes that deal with reason, and the Enlightenment is, you probably want to write these down. The first theme is going to be reason itself. Reason is thinking and trying to evaluate and figure things out using logic, like what is logical, how does it go in order, why did this come about, and reason, where you go through your mind and use the process to critically think and figure out how things come together, how things are created. And that is what reason is, using logic and reason to solve problems in society. Another theme is nature. Nature is dealing with the natural world of plants and animals as well as human beings and things that occur naturally. It's not forced, it's not man-made, it's not created, it just exists. And when we talk about natural law, I would write that underneath nature. Natural law is the natural laws that govern human beings. Another theme is happiness. Happiness, how do you describe being happy? Joy, satisfaction, being content, feeling elated or, content with a situation. That is how you describe happiness. And when we talk about the Enlightenment, people are going to say that you are responsible for your happiness. You should write that down as well. You are responsible. Take control of your happiness. You're in the pursuit of happiness. You have the right to pursue it, and you have the right to make it happen, as long as you're not harming others. Another theme would be progress. Progress is to improve or change or reform, to make better. And when we talk about the Enlightenment, you're going to talk about philosophers in a little bit, and progress is you have the ability to make society better. You have the ability to make your life better. You can further educate yourself. And also social mobility. Social mobility is another theme of the Enlightenment. And social mobility means that you're not limited to a social class anymore. When we discuss the Middle Ages and even the Renaissance, people, if you were poor, you were poor. If you're middle class, you're middle class. If you're upper class, you're upper class. And there's no idea of progress. And social mobility means that you can move yourself up in social classes or down, or just move yourself up in life in general. And last but not least, the final theme is liberty. Liberty is the right to express oneself, and in your thoughts and in your theories. And I would like for you to put a star underneath the theme liberty. Remember, it's described as being able to express oneself. And I want you to put a star underneath it and write freedoms. Example, freedom of speech. Okay? Now, the big question is, when the Enlightenment happens, it's a period of time where individuals use logic and reason from the scientific revolution to study humans, nature, and society. One thing that you need to understand, and I would make a note at the top of my paper or on the side somewhere about next to the word Enlightenment or somewhere, talk about salons. Salons are very important during the Enlightenment. People used to gather together socially and discuss their ideas. It was philosophers, artists, scientists, and writers. And guys, people, whether you think about it or not, we have salons sort of every day. If you sit at lunch and you guys talk about what's going on in the world or what's going on in society, you're having a social gathering where you discuss ideas or what you think of the world. I know that most of you noticed that during the presidential election, your parents sat down with their friends at your houses, or they met places and discussed the election or politics or what's going on in the world. That is a salon. Make sure you add that into your notes. And here are pictures. And actually, what's interesting about this picture right here is that there are several philosophers painted in here. Diderot, Voltaire, and all these individuals you'll learn about in a little bit. But you just gather and meet and discuss ideas. There will be a couple new views on government. But the first thing I want to discuss with you is a philosopher. You need to write the word philosopher on your paper. What you need to understand is that the Enlightenment is going to challenge traditional ways of life. And the individuals that are going to challenge this traditional way of life is going to be philosophers. Philosophers are people that they think and they develop theories and ideas on government and society. The first philosopher we're going to talk about is Thomas Hobbes. He wrote the book called The Leviathan. A leviathan is a giant sea monster. And so when Thomas Hobbes titles his book Leviathan, he believed that the absolute monarchy should be the center of government, and that people were not smart enough, they were too selfish and too greedy to run the government, and it was the king and his government's job to impose order. And he thought that people should give up their freedoms in return for safety and order from the government. Thomas Hobbes believed in the social contract, which is an agreement between society and the government. And he believed that the absolute monarchy was the best type of government to have. John Locke, totally different point of view. He's British, and he believed that people were happy, they were tolerant, and they could be reasonable. And we're talking about the common people here, educated people, common people. He believed all people were born equal with natural rights to life, liberty, and property. Notice that it's not the pursuit of happiness. That's Thomas Jefferson. He changed that for us. So what you need to understand about John Locke is that he's going to believe that natural rights are the rights to life, liberty, and property. And the purpose of the government was to protect these rights for the people. If the government didn't protect your rights, then it was your right as a citizen to overthrow it. John Locke wrote 2 treatises on government. And later, the 13 colonies are going to embrace his ideas, and it's going to influence them to start the American Revolution against Britain. Jean-Jacques Rousseau is from France. He actually believed that people were born good as well, and he wrote the book called The Social Contract. He's going to believe that the government should work for the people, common good, not just the wealthy, not just the upper class. And he believed that people should give up some of their freedoms to help the community or society as a whole. And this is Jean-Jacques right here, and there's the cover of his book. And there's a good quote on there. He said, "Man was born free, and he is everywhere in chains." And it's kind of symbolic because he's talking about that we are born free, but that we have to give up some of our rights to maintain order or protection. Baron de Montesquieu, he is from France. He's going to believe that the best form of government is going to include the separation of powers, i.e., like a good example would be the branches of government, because even in American society we've adopted this. Rome had it as well. You check and balance so that no individual or group could become too strong. And that's like when you have to think about these French philosophers as well as these English philosophers, they all are under a monarch, and they think that the monarchies, the kings and queens, abuse their power. So a lot of times when these individuals start speaking out with these new ideas, the common man, the middle class, and the lower class are going to embrace these ideas. So he believes that the branches should be separate and check and balance each other. He wrote The Spirit of the Laws, which admired Britain's going to have separate branches of government. And he admires that. And also just keep in mind that he's from France and they're under a monarchy. So he talks about how all governments and societies should adopt that in their government. So it's just like what we have. We have the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. And none of these branches can get too big for each other. New views in society. Voltaire is going to be a French philosopher, and Voltaire is extremely open and over the top about his feelings. He attacks the government, the nobility, and the church in France, and he talks about how they are completely in the red and they're wrong and they're not doing things right, and he kind of kills them with a pen, okay? He writes to defend justice religious tolerance, which when we talk about religious tolerance, that means different religions living together, and also liberty, which is the freedoms of mankind. But Voltaire is going to create many enemies in France. Just remember that when people speak out about something, there's always somebody who's going to hate on it and be like, shut up and get out of here. And so what England does, or what France does, is they say, Voltaire, they took him to prison twice, and then after a while they were like, you need to go live in England because we can't deal with you. Do you think his ideas will stop here, though? If you put no, then you are correct. He will not, his ideas are not going to stop here. That's why we're even talking about him today. Now, Diderot. Diderot is going to compile all the knowledge that he has, and other people. He'll meet with scientists, theorists, government people, and put all the knowledge into an encyclopedia. It'll be 28 volumes about art, science, government, and religion, and it's going to help spread the ideas of the Enlightenment. The church is not going to like the encyclopedia because all this is doing is putting more knowledge at the fingertips of the common man, the lower class, and the upper class. So they're just expanding their knowledge. How has the encyclopedia changed in the 21st century? It still exists, but I want you to explain in your notes, put a little star, and explain how you know that the encyclopedia still benefits our society and how it's actually changed in the 21st century. Okay, why is it significant? Why is it important? Mary Wollstonecraft, she is an English writer, and she will challenge the views of women's roles and their capabilities. She's very similar to Christine de Pizan. Remember, Christine de Pizan in the Renaissance said that, hey, women should be educated, we should be equal, we do matter. And Mary Wollstonecraft is going to say the same thing. She's going to demand equal rights for women, especially in education. She's going to say, you don't give us an opportunity to be educated. That's why you assume that we are not intelligent. She writes the book called A Vindication of the Rights of Women, which really advocates for equal education and also equality in society. Mary Wollstonecraft is not going to say, hey, we should just be at home making babies and making dinner. She's going to say, you need to let us attend school and be educated equally as males do, okay? And I want you to think about how there's a constant pattern throughout world history of women advocating for women to have education. That's all they want, education and equality. And I want you to think about, this is 1600s, 1700s, you know, how long does it take us to get that equality in society? Do you know? Adam Smith is going to be a man who, he's an economist, which means he deals with the economy and the finances and wealth of the world. Remember we talked about mercantilism and how nations' wealth is its strength. He's going to write a book called The Wealth of Nations. And he believed in laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is a French term, which means leave alone, type of economics, which means the government does not put their hand on the economic system in a country. He says that it could work without regulation, and that there was a individual, like invisible hand in a sense, in how the economy and trade and all of that works itself out on its own, and that it always follows the trend of supply, which is what you have, what the goods are, and the demand, which is the want for those goods. And this is Adam Smith right here on the left, and here's the book, The Wealth of Nations. Now, Enlightenment ideas are going to spread, and the interesting thing about the Enlightenment is that a lot of the Enlightenment philosophers directly challenge and go after the absolute monarchy, and there will be 3 monarchies that will rule using Enlightenment ideas. It's kind of interesting because it kind of seems like it doesn't make sense, but they will rule using the Enlightenment ideas and principles. And that is what an enlightened despot is. It's a monarch who rules according to Enlightenment ideals. Frederick II of Prussia, Catherine II of Russia, and Joseph II of Austria. It's very funny because they all end with an A. What you need to understand is that in Prussia, Frederick II was influenced by Voltaire. He introduced reforms. So he decided that children would get an elementary education. He stopped torturing people. He reduced censorship, and he supported religious toleration. He was like, you guys can, you know, be of a different religion and live in my nation. But a couple things that he didn't really back up on was he had no religious freedoms for Jews. He kind of discriminated against them, and he did not abolish the concept of serfdom in his nation. In Russia, Catherine II intended to start new reforms. Keyword is intended. Her Enlightenment ideals were in education, law, and justice. But she was like, she even wrote letters to Voltaire. Like, she communicated with Voltaire, talked to a couple of philosophers, but she said, all these ideals sound good, but she just decided to go in the other direction and become a tyrant in Russia and have complete power and control over her people. And in Austria, Joseph II used Enlightenment principles to change his nation. He eliminated torture, the death penalty. He helped the poor have food, medicine for the poor, and he even granted religious tolerance. He was like, any type of person who practices religion can live in my nation. And then he got rid of serfdom. But two groups are going to have a problem with this, and this is the nobility and the church. They don't like it, and the nobility is right under the monarchy, and they will absolutely hate it. So when Joseph dies, they take all of these free options and wonderful things that he was doing for his people away and decide to go back to the monarchy and an old reform where there's no rights for anybody. And what I want you to think about is that the Enlightenment ideas are going to inspire people. They're going to inspire people to start revolutions. They're going to get people to start asking for change. Like, I don't want to be under a king and queen. I don't want to have to follow orders from one person who does not take in consideration my everyday life. And it's going to inspire the American Revolution. It's going to inspire the French Revolution, which are things that you will hear about in the next 2 days. Do not forget that you can fast forward, rewind, or pause your video. Have a great day.